Hey guys, Kelade here. So I've recently got access to the Shadowlands beta. I've been testing some of the Covenant stuff with warriors. I think for this video, we're going to specifically focus on Fury warriors because right now for a lot of the classes and specs in the game, imagining it without your essences, corruptions, and your azurites, and if there isn't significant changes, that spec or class will feel very empty if this base kit isn't as strong or as fulfilling. And I think that's the case for arms right now. It just feels like it's missing so many things. And it actually just feels horrible to play. You're Rage Star like the entire time. So as far as for Fury, the best Covenant by far is going to be the Venthyr Covenant, which gives you the Condemn ability. And this changes your execute from, just 20% to you can now use it on enemies above 80% health. And of course, it works with any of the execute related stuff. So Massacre, which allows you to execute below 35% health, now works with Condemn. So that means you're able to use Condemn / execute for around 55% of the mob's HP, right? So that's actually a huge time where you're actually just executing the mob. On top of that, it changes the damage of your execute from physical to shadow damage, and that's huge in WoW, because in WoW, physical damage gets reduced by armor, whereas all the elemental damages that's in the game, like shadow, fire, what have you, does not. So there's like three things, right? On top of that, the number actually increases a little bit. Condemn does slightly more damage than execute, and it changes it from physical to shadow, and you can now use it above 80% health. This is actually way better for, in my opinion right now, for Fury and arms, because for arms, you actually, even if you can use Condemn above 80% health, you actually are rage starved to where you just can't spam it like you can for Fury. Of course, in Fury, you can cleave it just like any of your other ability up to 5 targets, and it's huge. On top of that, of all the Covenant abilities, because Condemn is built into execute, it works and synergizes much better with your base kit just because it involves more things, right? Because there's already things baked into the Fury base kit that affects execute. For example, just the fact that you can take Massacre as a talent, right? There's talent synergies there. And of course, when you think about all of the Covenant abilities now, don't think of them as like, essences or corruptions or whatever it is. Think of them like as actual warrior abilities. So all these things are all going to get buffed by, instead of just versatility and only crit chance only, it's going to get buffed by even Enrage, for example, or Siegebreaker. So all the Covenant abilities that we talk about, like it just works better with actual Fury abilities. Now, the reason why Condemn is so good is that it's good in single target and AoE, and it does enough in 5 target AoE for it to be even competitive in a mass AoE situation where, let's say, your tank somehow pulls like 20 mobs, right? That's why it's so good, is that your Covenant abilities, you can only pick one Covenant, right? So you're going to have to pick one Covenant that fits into all the things that you want to do in the game. And luckily right now, Condemn is really, really good in all of the situations, or at least most of them. Maybe there's like that fringe scenario, right, where a tank pulls the entire dungeon. Yeah, Spear of Bastion might be better, but for that just one pull. But I think overall in the course of a dungeon, Condemn is going to do more. And speaking of synergies, one of the other synergy things that you're going to have in an expansion is the soul binds and the conduit system. Now, a couple weeks ago, your potency conduits, which are the DPS ones, was not guaranteed to be 3 on each of these soul binds, but now it is going to be. Also, don't worry about which of the 3 that I've picked here, because obviously I haven't unlocked all of them because you have to actually quest to do them. But that's not a big worry at the moment. Just to quickly explain the conduit stuff really quick. So there's potency, there is finesse, and there is a endurance. Now, potency is the only one that you really care about because it actually does DPS. Finesse, does some more utility aspect things, but doesn't really increase DPS. And endurance is more so also kind of utility, but also focus on like self-healing, taking less damage, stuff like that. So really, we care about the 3 potency conduits that you're going to be using. The reason why Condemn is good, because one, every single Covenant has very, very close conduits where they basically all share, except they all have one conduit that is specific to their own Covenant ability. So for Condemn, it's Condemn's damage dealt and prevented are increased by 8% for each nearby enemy up to 40%. This is huge. That means if there's 5 enemies around you, your Condemn now does 40% more damage. And of course, your AoE cleaving that Condemn with your Whirlwind Cleave, right? And when you look at any of these things that I'm hovering over, all the damage numbers that are in white are just a rank version. So these are rank 1. So at the worst, this is what's going to do. I think right now for conduits, I think they go up to 14, maybe slightly more than that ranks. So this percentage and number is actually going to go up higher. And I think because of this, on stuff like 4 to 5 target cleave, Fury Warriors should be one of the best specs in the game for that type of content. And then of course, you also have the Juggernaut. Now Juggernaut is available for every single covenant, right? It's a shared conduit, like most of them are. But the thing is, this works with Condemn. Now, it's not the OP Juggernaut that we've seen in Legion, where it increases just raw damage. This just gives you a 3% critical strike for 8 seconds, and it stacks up to 6 times at the lowest rank. That goes up, of course. But regardless, right, there's 2 conduits already that are increasing your, like, just your conduit and execute output. And I think that's where it's big in regards to, like, how this works. On top of that, right, Condemn just generates so much rage because it generates 20 rage. So you're able to like synergize it with using more rampages, and it also makes anger management better. So it all really works out together. And that's where I feel like Condemn is the best, that it feels like it complements and adds to your kit, as opposed to just like, oh, here's this one other ability that you just press after you use Recklessness and get enraged, right? Condemn actually feels like it changes your gameplay a little bit. It actually makes you feel like it's adding to it, and it isn't just like, oh, press it and forget it type of ability. So I actually don't mind that Venthyr and Condemn is the best covenant. I actually would prefer it if it stayed that way, to be honest. Now, it would be nice if some of the other ones were more compelling, but we'll get into all those in a second. Now, speaking of all the covenants, right, you don't just only get that one ability, right? Every covenant has that damage like ability, and it also has this kind of utility ability. Now, for Venthyr, it's Door of Shadows, right? 1.5 second cast, 1 minute cooldown, and it teleports you to a max of 35 yard range. Now that's slightly shorter than Leap, because I think Leap goes up to 40 yards range. So, you know, if I just give you an example, right, if I Leap, boom. All right, it's still kind of fast, right? Now, obviously there's stuff with Leap with like, if you don't finish your Leap, your character model is usually where you started a Leap. So when mechanics happen, you can still get hit. But Leap is pretty fast, right? It's fast enough, right? Not a blink, but it's fast enough. Now, Door of Shadows, 1.5 second cast time. Oh, it might seem short because 1.5 seconds. It's an eternity in WoW, especially with the current meta WoW with all the affixes, all the shit falling down. Watch, if I do this and I cast this entire channel, you're stuck in place, right? And then you teleport over here. Of the current stuff that I've done in the game and all of the Mythic Plus that I run, which are, I think there's like 3 or 4 dungeons you can actually do Mythic Plus of. All the mechanics where things fall from the sky or you have to travel somewhere, they fall down pretty quick. Like you maybe have 1 second to react to it. So you casting Door of Shadows can actually kill you in a lot of these scenarios. It can be, so I want to go from where I'm standing to the bottom of the stairs. It can be when I'm casting it, when I start a cast, that space is clear, where I'm standing is clear. As I'm channeling the cast, some indicator falls on me and I'm dead. That has happened multiple times on the beta so far. So I would say, especially when you compare this to the other abilities that are out there, it's just a little bit too slow. If the cast time can be quicker, or some way to like maybe guarantee that you're immune to damage during it, maybe immune damage would actually be too OP, but some way to make it safer to use, I think would be good. On top of that, you can't use Door of Shadows if it's not line of sight. It follows basically the same rules as Leap. You just have to make sure it's line of sight. So, you know, even in situations where you're like, oh, let me DPS the boss a little bit more and I'll like leap out or door out at the end, you still have to walk a little bit afterwards, because let's say the boss is doing an AoE mechanic, you have to line of sight, which is a mechanic in the raid. If you want to line of sight it, you have to like, you know, Door of Shadows a little bit further away. Let's pretend the boss is here, but then you still are gonna have to walk a little bit, right? Make sure you're fully line of sight. So it's not as good as you think it is. Now, let's talk about a covenant that is as good as you think it is. So of course, now we have the Night Fae Covenant, which they also have a teleporting movement ability. There's this called Soul Shape, which turns you into a Vulpin, teleporting 15 yards. So it's a short mini blink, and also increases your movement speed by 50%. You can also reactivate it during that 12-second window to teleport again every few seconds on a 1.5 minute cooldown. And of course, if you're in a resident area, you can stay in the Vulpin forever. But so I'm standing at the tip of, I just want to show you guys this so you can see like that I'm actually moving. So I'm standing at the tip of the leaves here. When I press the ability, I'm gonna blink forward, and it's an instantaneous blink, and that's very important. And of course, I get that 50% movement speed, right? So when you're actually in a fight and you actually need to dodge something like a blink, this is huge, right? As a warrior, to have a blink ability, right? And then of course, a few seconds later, you can blink again. Now, if you use an ability, let's say Whirlwind, it's gonna go away, right? So obviously you're gonna use it just to move really quick And if you're not taking damage, great, and then you can use it maybe again if you're still in a phase where you can't fight. So I actually think of all of the movement stuff, which right now for the Covenants, there's this one in Dwarf Shadows. This is the much superior version. It's so much better. There are so many more situations where this will help you live, right? It's an instantaneous blink. So I really like that of it. But of course, we care about the damaging ability. The damaging ability here is Ancient Aftershock. Unleash a wave of anima, dealing damage for 5 seconds and knocking them down for 1.5 seconds. And every enemy struck, they take additional dot damage. Every time that dot damage ticks, you get 6 rage. Now, Ancient Aftershock does have a target cap, and it only hits 5 enemies. And the stun is only 1.5 seconds. Now, this is basically a shitty shockwave, right? That's what this is. A shitty shockwave that does some damage. So the one thing I will note is that dot, when it ticks and it gives you that rage back, it does do it for every target. So if you hit Ancient Aftershock on 5 targets, you're gonna get 30 rage when it ticks on all of them. So it is gonna give you a significant rage, especially if you use Recklessness, right? That's now gonna be 60 rage. So you're gonna get massive rage gain when you're doing an AoE pack with Aftershock. So that's one thing to be aware of. And then of course, Aftershock actually lines up better with their Recklessness compared to some other ability, right? Ancient Aftershock, 1.5 minute cooldown. Recklessness is also a 1.5 minute cooldown, so they actually line up perfectly and you can just always use them together. Now, because of that, that means you're really using Ancient Aftershock as a DPS ability, so it's getting rid of that whole CC ability, which I feel like reduces the effectiveness of it, because one of the biggest draw points is that it's a shockwave, right? The shitty thing is, if your tank pulls more than 5 adds, and you have that one ad that you want to stun, you probably still want to just Stormbolt them, actually, because there's a chance, right, when you Ancient Aftershock, that one ad, right, the 6th ad that's in there doesn't actually get stunned. So it's unfortunate. And of course, there is that 5 target cap, right, on your ability. So that's another thing. Now, as far as for AoE abilities that don't have a cap, let's talk about the next Covenant. And now we have the Kyrian Covenant, which for their ability, you get Spear of Bastion. This is the much better version. It does almost the same amount of damage instantaneously up front. It's actually slightly less, but Spear of Bastion does not have any target cap. And then the dot that it takes, the additional dot, it does it over 4 seconds, much faster than Ancient Shockwave, right? If the Ancient Shockwaves die, it's over. And also Spear of Bastion is on a 1 minute cooldown, so you can use it more, but that means that it also desyncs with your Recklessness, in which case, if you really want to line all of them up, you probably want to just go after Anger Management. Then you can have better combos of Spear and Recklessness and all of your buffs together, because once again, right, all of your Covenant abilities are going to get buffed by all of your buffs and debuffs, right? So Spear Bastion is like the go-to if you're somehow like only doing content where your tank just constantly pulls like 20 mobs and you need an ability that AoEs everything. This thing will. Just be careful, obviously, because it's going to do a lot of threat and aggro, especially on skittish weeks. We've done some keys with skittish. Yeah, this thing rips aggro with Dragon Roar like crazy, so be aware of that. But yeah, it's very strong, but I feel unfortunately it's really only strong in that one scenario where you're doing like really high amounts of AoE with a lot of targets, and I don't think it can compete with Condemn in all the other areas, like more single target or smaller cleave. I unfortunately don't think it's able to compete there. Now, the other thing that this Covenant gives you is this Summon Steward, which gives you a File Serenity, right? This file restores 15% health, whatever, right? That's fine. But it removes all diseases, all poisons, all curses, and all bleed effects on your character. And you're always going to have a file, because the Summon Steward is, dude, this guy's on a 5 minute cooldown and he gives you 3. So you're always going to, there's no way you're not going to have a file for an encounter. You're always going to have one. So what does this mean, right? I've done a couple of bosses, right, throughout the raid testing. There's a lot of debuffs from the bosses. There's a lot of bleeds and potentially other debuffs from other bosses. But this is huge, right? Especially for situations where, let's say even if you're doing Mythic Plus. I don't think there's a healer that can do all of these. So I don't think it's possible. But correct me if I'm wrong, there is one guy that can do all of them. But the file comes in super handy if your healer can end that spell one of these and you get hit by the affix, right? You just instantly clean it all off. I mean, you talk about the first boss in a raid. So the first time we did raid test on that boss did an 8 stack bleed on the tanks. The fact that you can use the file and instantly remove them, it's actually huge. Now, they actually nerfed that during testing to be like lesser stacks. I think it's like 4 now. But even then, with the ability to get rid of like a raid plus mechanic or whatever, and probably even in PvP, instantly removing all those debuffs, this is probably the best like non-DPS skill of all the covenants. It's absolutely huge. Now the question is the defensive capability that this covenant gives you enough for you to care about it and want it for the offensive aspects? Probably not. I mean, I don't think Blizzard's going to design fights in a way where if you're just a Kyrian, you just beat it. I feel like they have to have some way to like make that counterplay. So I feel like you're still going to go with the option that does the most DPS. I mean, unless the potion literally gives you an immunity and you can live through stuff. I don't know. I don't think it's going to actually be enough to, I think, overcome the Condemn damage. Now, of course, we have to save the worst for last, and that is Necrolords. I think when this covenant got like unveiled, and I think in BlizzCon a couple years ago, they're like, oh shit, a banner, right? You know, brandish the banner for 2 minutes, increasing your movement speed by 10. All right, you get glory when you do raging blows and when you kill enemies. Reactivating it gives you a 20% maximum health and 50% attack speed to you and 4 allies. But I think when they unveiled it, I don't think it was those exact numbers. But I feel like it could be kind of strong because you're like, oh, you're buffing yourself and you're buffing your team, right? So like you can be a more supported role, but it's so shit. It's like this banner literally does nothing. Absolute garbage. So I would definitely never pick Necrolords in any current situation. It literally provides no value. Especially when you look at some of the Covenant abilities, how much damage they do on a pull, right? Like Condemn can do like 50% of your damage. Spirit Bastion can do like 80% of your damage on AE pull. Banner does like, you know, 0.0001% of your damage. It's so shit. And then the second ability you get is Fleshcraft. It just gives you a shield. I mean, between dodging an ability completely with the blinks or removing debuffs completely with the potion, getting a shitty ass shield doesn't do anything. And channeling near a corpse gets an additional like number to your shield, and you can potentially get some buffs, but I haven't seen the buffs be anything like crazy. I think the one of the ones I got, you just got like more HP or something. This covenant is complete shit right now. There needs to be a lot of buffs for this covenant, and yeah, it's too useless. So I hope that was a good overview of all the covenants so far. Of course, there's the usual caveat of this is beta, this is testing, right? There's gonna be a lot of things that are gonna be changing. You know, when the expansion comes out, maybe they'll have tuned the numbers to where Condemn and Venthyr isn't the best. But right now on the beta, this is the best choice, and I'm okay with it. Makes sense to me, right? This covenant ability works out the best for your character. Yeah, it's unfortunate if you like some of the other transmogs or mounts, you're not going to be able to use them because you're going to just pick this one right now. So yeah, let me know what you guys think down in the comments about these covenant abilities. And as always, thanks for checking out the video, guys. Feel free to subscribe to see more. See ya.